but only my name is going to, and Michael's name will be available for that. And if you have a question, there is, if you notice in the bottom of your chat, there's something that says reactions. And if you want, you can do something like raise your hand. You can raise your hand like, see, I'm raising my hand, and then to lower your hand. If you have got something you want to comment. I am most interested in hearing what your reactions are to the questions that I prompt you with, because that's how we're going to figure out what we need to do in this country, how to make the system better. We're going to have 5 classes. We're going to be meeting every week, except the end of July, which is going to be Tisha B'Av. We're not going to be learning that night. That would be inappropriate to do so. And then we're going to come back for a final course, I believe, class in the end of August, excuse me. Each session is going to have a particular topic. Today's session is called Lock and Key. What's the point of prison? Can I have the first slide? So this is the name of the topic of the class. And we're going to go to the second slide, please. What is the point of prison? We're also going to learn a class about justice. Justice shall you pursue. There'll be Jewish learning here about standards of evidence, a class about clean slate, how do criminals make amends, a class about moving forward, reacceptance in the criminal background check, and finally a class called an ounce of prevention, addressing crime before it happens. See, currently there's in America that the system is in great need of reform. And that's not just important for criminal suspects or criminals, but it's for all of us. We want our country and our communities to be safe. And the way we deal with criminals is a very important part. I'm actually going to stop using the word criminal. I don't like that word. I was a public defender who dealt with detainees. I like the word detainee better. Criminal is a big judgment. I don't want this to be a judgment class. You're welcome to add whatever you want, but I want it to be more about learning and figuring out what these things mean to us. So there's been a lot of change that's going on in this country. Can we have the next slide that you put up, Michael? So, wow. In 1925, there were about 100,000 inmates in federal and state prison. And in 2000 and 2000 now, about 2020, this is actually an old thing. 2020, it's over 2 million. Look at the increase about that. The increase has been tremendous. Can we look at the next slide, please? Problem is, not only is the problem is that people are serving longer sentences, because there's a thought that we should put people who've done bad things in for longer. But unfortunately, the crime rates have not gone down. It's almost a counterintuitive thing. You'd think punishing more, but that has not helped us at all. Longer sentences has not made people safer, nor has it helped people who are in prison come out. Yes, sir. Jeremy, please. You're muted. Okay. Yeah, you're all the comments you're making are very accurate. We will get to that in its time, but I appreciate that you're expressing the problems we have in here. I've got a question for everybody. Why do we punish criminals? I want people to give me answers here. Why do we punish criminals? Who's got some answer to this? Feel free to raise your hand so I can see. The Torah has different theories too about why we should punish. But basically today we're going to be talking about the different theories of punishment. David, could you put the slide up, please? Actually, the next one, I think. Here we go. The 4 theories of punishment. 1 is retribution. That means when somebody harms somebody else, they deserve to suffer. similar and proportionate harm themselves. Retribution. Under this theory, punishment is not given for any utilitarian purpose to improve, but simply because the offender deserves to suffer harm proportionate to the harm they cause others. This is called justice. Retribution means punish them because they've done something wrong. All right, that's sheer. You know, the Torah is unfairly, Torah says an eye for an eye, but that's never the way it's been interpreted. An eye for eye generally means monetary punishment, because, for example, if God forbid I punch someone in the eye and they get a little blue mark there for the rest of their life, how can somebody do that same thing to me? So retribution, so the Torah talks about giving monetary compensation for injuries. Not, the eye for eye does not mean someone takes your eye, you take their eye. The second theory of punishment is called incapacitation. That holds that detainees are a danger to society. In order to protect ourselves, we need to separate them from us and disable them, incapacitate them from harming us. Put people in jail to get them away. If they're in jail, they cannot hurt us. That's called incapacitation. The third, as the rabbi mentioned, is called deterrence. Punishment is necessary to deter people from committing crimes. According to the theory of deterrence, the punishment given for a particular crime must be strong enough to be an effective deterrent against it. I can tell you that in my years as a public defender, there were lots of new laws added, lots of sentencing laws. For example, that if someone uses a gun in a crime, just uses a gun, is an automatic 10-year extension to the sentence. If they shoot the gun, it's 15. And if they injure someone with the gun, all right, that is an automatic 25 years added on to something else. That's what the legislature said, in order to sort of deter people. Unfortunately, that does not really work well in the mind of a 15-year-old gang member who's not thinking about that. Deterrence generally doesn't seem to work, but it's a theory of punishment. The fourth theory is called rehabilitation. And the purpose of punishment is to reform the offender so they will not commit a crime again. Which of these theories of punishment do you think guides the justice system in our country? Which of these? And I'm interested in hearing what you've got to say. Which of these theories guide the way our country works? I'll take volunteers. Wonderful. Because again, this is the way criminologists look at these. These are the general four major theories that we have. Usually, they're mixture about how they come out in practice. But what I want to know, so you believe that they're all involved in this country. I want to know what other views people have. Is he unmuted yet? At the heartstrings of the jury. Yeah. They want to pull that because it really, you're right, it really shouldn't be. Of course, we want to just put the facts into a machine and come up with an answer. The great thing about our country is you get found guilty by a jury of your peers. But you are right about the emotive part of it. Kind of confounds everything when we think about trying to get justice done. I'm going to go now, please, thank you, to Melinda. You have a comment, please? Yeah. I'm hearing that a lot of people are focusing on incapacitation. Rebbetzin, would you like to, Abby, you want to?
I just wanted to say one fact, that 90% of people at the state level and 97% of people at the federal level are really forced to plead guilty. They really do not get a jury of their peers. They do not get to go before a jury of their peers. They're pleading, and they're forced to plead because they're scared of higher sentences. So I question whether any of this is true, because part of the reason that the jails are filling up is that everyone's pleading guilty. The filter has the tap on the filter is open. They just toss them in. They don't bother doing the court system. So I think that is part of the problem. The court system's also broken.
Having been a public defender, if people stopped pleading guilty, the whole system would grind to a halt. Basically, as Abby said, it's let's make a deal. And, making a deal, it moves things. But if everyone said, we want a jury trial, the whole system would just collapse. They could not handle that, which is a problem because you've got a right to a jury trial. But even if you didn't do the act, and I know people, I had clients who told me they didn't do it, they got a deal that what they were facing was tremendous amounts of time, and they took the deal because they didn't want to spend, let's say, 20 years in prison, and they took a deal for, let's say, 10, so they can get off with good time in about 5. So it's the system. You are right. It's an important fact to talk about. Getting to, but I want to stick on the punishment aspect here. I want to go to Jeremy, please. You have a comment about this, about theories about punishment. Do you think guide the justice system in our country?
The opportunity is there, but
very important. Jeremy, what you're saying is very important. We think about what we call prisons. They are called penitentiaries. They were originally designed for people to do penitence. They would be separated from their former life. They were made to reflect through isolation, work, fasting, and or Bible study to change their ways, all right, institutions in which people go to correct their behavior. That was the major theories of the penitentiary system in our country. It was designed for rehabilitation. Namely, someone did something wrong, let's take them away for a while, but basically let's try to help re-educate them and let them understand what they did through various lessons. But that theory changed because in the 1960s, a growing amount of people believed that criminal behavior was due to mental illness, and with improper supervision in the system, that people could be cured. So there was indeterminate sentencing, that there were people checking how's this person doing, until it was basically a medical model of criminal justice. And for those of you who have been behind bars or have family members, you know just how much mental illness has been involved in whatever that person did and their life choices. Tremendous emotional illness from a life of abuse, coming from familial abuse, tremendous pain. Linda had a big symposium a month ago about the criminalization of mental illness. I know when I do chaplaincy work and I visit people in Cook County, everyone who I meet has issues, and most of them used hard drugs to self-medicate. And while they were doing that, maybe they did crime to get money to do this. This is a terrible cycle. But the belief was that rehabilitation gave judges wide discretion, and then parole boards decided when a detainee was cured and then fit to return. But things started to change. In the 1970s, there was a belief that this medical model, rehabilitative model, wasn't working. And then it started to be, and so I mentioned Nixon, time to get tough on crime. And the idea is that by longer sentences, putting people away longer, that the sentence will serve as a deterrent. I promise you that even though to use a gun in a crime is 10 years, to shoot it is 15, and if you hit somebody, it's an extra 20 to 25. That does not deter people from using guns, but it punishes them. It incapacitates them for longer, and it's punitive, but it doesn't. So the system has changed, and where have we now? We've got a tremendous percentage of people, the highest percentage of any country in the world, are serving behind bars in America. Very, very high, with longer sentences. Are we better off for that? I would wonder. Ari, you've got a question or comment? As Jeremy talked about earlier, there's a horrible vicious cycle. There are privatized prisons that do better with clients serving longer times, and they have lobbyists who make donations to politicians who then make the laws to increase sentences. So it's a vicious cycle. Privatize prisons, lobbyists giving money, donations to legislators who then increase the prison, back and forth, back and forth. And so it's a terrible cycle. People on this chat have been victims of that. Sentences which might have been 20 years ago. When I first started as a public defender, you got good time for everything, 50%. So the 17-year-old or 16-year-old that killed somebody, murdered somebody, all right, back in the day when I first started, would get 40 years, which means if they behaved, they would get out in 20. And when they came out at 20 years, as like a late 30s, okay, in their late 30s, they're no longer a member of the gang because the gang is you're too old for that, but they've served time, they've been incapacitated, and they don't go back to what they were doing because they were doing some kind of gangbanging thing. But in order to get tough on crime, they had something called truth in sentencing, which means you got the time that you did. And very few cases where crimes got day for day. And has that made things better? It hasn't. But the sentences of my clients raise tremendously. People who try to do tough on crime has not worked in that situation. Let's see here. So basically, the history of America has been a shift from rehabilitation to retribution and incapacitation. So we went from rehabilitation, trying to take the person and curing them of their to retribution and incapacitation. Can we have the next slide, please? So in the old days, people were isolated and they were trained through prayer and religion and all sorts of work that they could get to be better. Next slide, please. And then during the Industrial Revolution, these people, the people in prison would be given work to do. You know, work will set you free in a way, in a good way. In the 1960s, the medical model that it's a mental illness that's causing people to do crimes. And then in the 70s and 80s, this whole model was under attack. And so we've changed completely in this country in a very short, in my lifetime, changed to a system which is basically incapacitation and retribution. Please watch the video here. Can we go back to the video? Or
America has a hefty prisoner problem on its hands. Well over 2 million individuals fill America's jails, with the cost of mass incarceration taking a huge $80+ billion bite out of the country's annual budget. How did we become the world's leading jailer, with the highest prison population rate on the planet? Things were not always this way. U.S. prisons are called penitentiaries and correctional facilities because they were originally intended as a tool to rehabilitate offenders, enabling them to regret and abandon their mistakes and to rejoin society fairly quickly. Keeping people locked up was not a goal in itself. This historically optimistic attitude took a nosedive in the early 1970s. As the rehabilitation theories guiding the criminal justice system crumbled in the face of new research. According to the...
We just hope that other people learn from him.
good news so much for sharing your personal experience and just explaining, you know, just how important it is to think carefully about our theories of punishment and what works. So I appreciate that. Difficult questions, you know. We understand that we would all agree that people who are dangerous and are doing very serious violent acts we should take them off the streets. That's important. The question is, what do we do with them inside? And that's what we're thinking about. So, an important question, and this is for the parents on the chat. I want you to reflect upon an instance in which you punished your child for doing something wrong. And I'd like you to share with the group about what you were trying to achieve by this punishment. About sometime your child did something, you punished them. What were you trying to achieve by this punishment? And I'd like to have some, everyone can think about who's a parent. Yes. The purpose there of all these things was to educate the child, all right? Educate the child, okay, so that they would not do it again and they become a better person, positive, not like spare the rod, spoil the child, but it was to educate the child so they understand what's going on, the various steps, and if it went out of control, to then try to get them to turn them into a better person, not just you did the crime, do the time. It's interesting because when I grew up as a kid, in the 60s, my father came for the same purpose that he did. His father would have a strap, and if I did something pretty serious, it would be like a little, like it wasn't even a hard hit. It wasn't, okay, but just once or twice. But so my dad did that. Eat the strap, all right, and it wasn't all the time. It would be something like if I punched my brother and gave him a black eye, all right, and sit on the bed at night and talk about why it hurt him more to do that. I'm getting teary. It hurt him more to do that, but what he was thinking about, and it's interesting. Like now we've learned, at least for most modern thing, it's to talk to the child about what they did, process it, and why you were disappointed in them works a lot better if they understand than just the slap, a reaction. That to understand the consequences, to educate them not to do it again, will help them. We've learned, we've changed in my lifetime. When I was a kid, and I knew parents who had paddles and 2x4s against someone's butt. That was being done, and as well as teachers. When you were in school, put out your knuckles with a ruler. I saw that happen dozens of times. We don't do that anymore because we learned, first of all, there's a problem with that. But number two, better to process and to educate and for them to reflect on that. One of the things about this class, which there's a ton of materials on, it looks at what the Torah says about punishment. And we're blessed to be have a clip from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was speaking a while ago. We're going to put on the video here with his words and translation. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was all about we are doing the wrong thing by trying to be too hard on crime. And that doesn't mean that bad people should be out in the street. But the most important thing, the Torah view, is rehabilitation. Can we play that clip of the Rebbe, please? Thank you. This is about showing about. So this was happened why prisons have increased. But I want to get to the tape, please. Maybe down. It's a video, not this one. It's going to be the one. Maybe it is that one. All right. And this is not the one. We want the. Here we go. It's called technical difficulties. Yeah, that's it. Here we go. Let's listen to
Torah, der Zweck von haltener Menschen in Beis Asuri ist nicht, dass Torah, der Zweck von haltener Menschen in Beis Asuri ist nicht, dass der Linie von Einisch, nur geben ihm eine Gelegenheit, soll sich missbeinen sein. In die Jahre, was getan, bildlich zu ihm, wo der Vater hat nicht reingesetzt bei Beis Asuri, mit Gitte mechet Möglichkeit, soll sich lernen, gestalten sein, wechule, soll sich können zugereden, zu einer Reise gehen und ohne im Leben Achaim, Beseder, und Bescholem, und Bejesher, durch die Achone, was wird haben, bemerkt von den Tagen, was gefindet hat, in den Beis Asuri. Wo dazu darf man haben zum allen Menschen, soll haben bei sich ein Gefühl, als ist bis Almenukid Musein. als ist ein Mensch, was eben nur wird wollen, ist demut Odo Miloshne Damelel, in der Welt bis Almeinu geht man sehen. Bischaß mit Nembem zu, die Möglichkeiten, und mit drückt ihm zu, mit quetscht ihm zu, und wir lassen ihm nicht aufheben den Kopf, ist nicht nur der Beisa Asur im 4. Teil dem Tachlis, Adrabe, macht von einem Apescheer noch mehr, wie gewähnt Bischaß, als ihn reingegangen. Wo der Pfarrer Mima Torres von der Beisa Asurim, aber die Jiden, was gefunden sich dort, weil der sagt, der Nicht-Jiden, weil er geht zu Sheva Mitzvahs, Bnei Neach, le-Reime Mesrucham, le-Ede Desrucham, als in die Unionen, was eine nicht gemuchrochen, seine sie Punkt, wie unter die, was gefunden sich Bechelus, Punkt unter die, was sie seine Schemri von Beis Asuri.
So this is coming from one of the greatest spiritual leaders at that time, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was talking then. And you wouldn't have found, I think, many spiritual leaders coming out, but forthrightly saying that the problem is that we're not focusing on helping the person become a better person. We're just putting him in, incapacitating him and doing something of retribution. And when they come out, they aren't any better. So it's important to see, there's a lot of materials, which one, it'll be beyond the scope of our class, but to think about what is the purpose of punishment. And we would all agree, all right, as Aharon would, we do not think that seriously dangerous criminal people should be out on the street doing that. Something needs to be done for that. And that's beyond me. I was a public defender. It's beyond me to come up with what we do with that situation. In a democracy where there's a lot of freedoms that we have by the Constitution. On the other hand, we could say when someone should leave the earlier models, and there people were doing bad acts, of penitence and correction would be an important thing. And our system needs a huge overhaul. Some would say that prisons and those who've been in prison could say that should be used much less, that there were people in prison that should not be in prison. They'd be better off doing things on the outside. People going, a lot of some white collar crime things, some crimes in which nobody was damaged, but somebody like took some money or something, not a lot of damage. Maybe prison should be used a lot less. And that with people who could say that the whole system is a racket and it should be completely overhauled. And as the Rebbe says, protecting the dignity of prisoners and placing rehabilitation at the center of its focus. Criminals, detainees should deserve another chance. Now, if people keep on doing crimes, and obviously they haven't been corrected, and we should think about that. The Torah policy is that we should use less prisons, that they should be dealing with rehabilitation, and that people should be given a second chance through the work they do in prison in order to help them become better people. The older models, that what was around for hundreds of years, except in the last 50, was to focus on correcting the individual. The process of which we talked about last year in our class on teshuva, which means to return. I think it's because we've been sold an it's a counterintuitive thing. Intuitively think, punish harder and therefore less, but that doesn't work. The church and state thing, I'm not sure how other religious traditions view such a thing. I'm not sure. You know, the Rebbe, he might, if you looked across the map of Jewish scholars, they might be different. But the Rebbe is a Hasidic master, and he's going to focus on the Gadlut, the greatness of Adam, of human. And that, as I was teaching in class in the Baal Shem Tov, that Adam has the word, relates to the word domeh, that we all are in creating God's image, so we all have godly aspects about us. Let's bring them out. Whereas other things can say you got to work on yourself, you got to correct yourself, you got to get rid of the bad. We focus on the Hasidic view is that you should be focusing on the good. and let that person feel. So perhaps that is, but we see other countries that don't have any necessary connection to spiritual things, or there is a separation, not by constitution, that have different models. Like in Scandinavia, they have different models. We heard about the different models of punishment, focusing, I believe, much more on rehabilitation. And I think they've got a much less crime rate. The fact that in our country we have the highest criminal population rate and also the highest rate of incarceration, which has increased sixfold since the 60s. Namely, that the rate of people in prison is 6 times as more as it was when I was a kid in the 60s. And are we better now? We didn't have the kind of killings in Oakland and in Chicago that we have now. Are we better off now? I would say no. I'm going to go to Aryeh, who's had his hand up for a while, please. Aryeh? This is a good point. I should tell you that I had to be selective with the material. There was a class about the death penalty in Jewish law. I thought it'd be very technical. These are things for a person to learn, but I should tell you, there hasn't been a death penalty since there was a Sanhedrin. And under the Sanhedrin, there had to be 2 independent witnesses. The person had to be warned, talked about the penalty, and it was almost impossible. But you are right, the Torah believes that there should be a death penalty. As a matter of fact, as a public defender, I believe that there should be a death penalty if it was done according to Torah law, with the Sanhedrin, of which every one of them knew 70 languages, and they were all the highest upright people, and they did criminal. They would have. I do, and I believe there could be, not in our system with discretion. So unfortunately, we're not the bloody court. So you do the math. It would be very, very rare. And even though there's a ton in Sanhedrin about how this would be going, if you study that material, it was a very rare thing to be done. That was how the system was. And yes, it wouldn't be just for murder. There were other kind of things, idolatry, things like that. I want to bring things in and talk about where we are, where we're going. Next week, we're going to talk about, because this is a class about crime and punishment, we're going to talk about systems of justice in the Torah and in the Talmud, about justice shall you pursue, about how judges and juries must be clear-sighted, and evidence, etc. And I'm going to ask people who've had testimony be given against them, who observed things in court, who may have pled guilty, to reflect on their own experience, or maybe with a family member on this. But to tie things up here, we're coming to the end of our meeting. I want to start as soon as possible at 7 o'clock next session. If you can come in as soon as possible, so we can do as much as we do it. And I like the way things work with the questions here. I wish to tell you that Denise put down that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops holds the same view regarding crime, incarceration, and punishment as the Lubavitcher Rebbe did. So that was going into that. But basically, to think about the theories of punishment, your own situation. Was justice done with you, and what could have been better in terms of the punishment that you were allotted? Next week, we're going to talk about before punishment, about standards of evidence that we think about, and we can all reflect about what the evidence was against us or against our family members, and the problems with that. And next Wednesday will be the beginning of the 3 weeks, which is a time of reflection. So we're going to be meeting, it'll be turning to the 17th of Tammuz, very importantly. We'll talk about that then, but I wish you all a great week, and we're going to sign off right now. I don't have time to take additional comments, but looking forward to seeing you next week here at 7 o'clock for our next class, is going to be about standards of evidence. I appreciate it. We can talk about this more tomorrow, next week. I'm signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Can we stay on to continue the conversation? I'm okay with it, but I need to go to teach another class. But if you,
so evidently, so you can't stay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to leave, but if you wanted to continue, that's okay with me, with the administrators here. It's up to you. Be my play. If you want to, that's fine with me. Because there's a lot of questions here, but I must go at this time. I'll see you next Wednesday, God willing. Take care. All the best.